everyone, welcome back to the Chapple Show, and today I'm going to be talking about sole proprietorships versus corporations versus LLCs, limited liability companies. And this was requested by, I think it was Kaylee, I'm not quite sure, on Twitter and Facebook like months and months and months ago. I'm sorry this video is late. But yeah, I have some stuff written out here already, but I'm actually going to expand on that a lot. So if you guys are interested in starting a business, this video is for you because this could save you lots of money and save you lots of time and effort and all that kind of stuff. So let's get started here. So I'm going to talk about what the structure of each one of these are. So a sole proprietorship, if you're self-employed and you don't have a separate legal entity, that's where you are. You have a sole proprietorship. And yeah, generally just self-employed people or a one-owner business with no partners or anything, that's generally where you lie. It could also be LLCs or corporations, but generally speaking, like 80% of solo businesses are sole proprietorships. I'm going to explain why that's good and bad. We're going to move on here. Corporation. This is all those giant companies you see on the stock market, they're all corporations. So they have shareholders. That's stuff you see on the stock exchange. I just talked about that. But you can set one of these up. I mean, a lot of these corporations don't have to go public. They don't have to be on the stock market. So anyways, we are going to go over here to an LLC, and these have members. Now you could have one member that owns 100% of the company, or you could have three members that own 30%, 50%, and 20% of the company. And I don't know what the maximum amount of members you can have is. I have absolutely no idea. But generally, these are for like a few different owners in one company. But they could also totally be for yourself too, and I'll explain that in a second here. So we're going to move on to some of the advantages and disadvantages here. So for a sole proprietorship, not a solo, but it's kind of the same thing. A sole proprietorship, it's really easy to set up. You don't need to go through any legal process. No legal documents, no legal fees. You just literally, as soon as you make a sale by yourself through your company, and even if you don't even need to have a company name. If it's just through you, it's all set up. You're a sole proprietor. Congratulations. It gets taxed. All the profits you make get taxed as personal income. Now we're going to talk about this over here, but that can be good and that can be bad. So, for example, if the business makes $100,000, you get taxed at the $100,000 tax bracket, whatever that may be in your country. I know that we actually have a lot more countries listening to these videos and watching than I thought, so it gets taxed as personal income. By the way, one more thing I wanted to mention is that an LLC, a limited liability company, not available in Canada and not available in a lot of countries in the world. So you Americans out there, you're lucky, and we're going to get to that. But just so you know, my knowledge on LLCs, like I have an okay knowledge, I know what they are, I know what they do, but it's not as strong as a lot of people that have actually got the privilege to set one up in the United States. I probably would have set one up maybe by about now, but I can't because I'm in Canada. So we're going to move on to the main thing here, which is liability. And we're going to talk about why these are really, really good as you start to grow your business. Liability. Okay. Let's just say you have that online whatever business. I always like to use the graphic design business. So you have this online graphic design company and you're just going to call it whatever, Chapple Graphic Design Inc. If you are under a sole proprietorship, there's a few things that can happen here. I'll give you the first example. So if I were to take out a loan to start that company, which a lot of businesses do, especially restaurants and stuff. But if I did it for this graphic design business for whatever, advertising or marketing or something like that, and for whatever reason the company fails or whatever, or the company can't pay back that loan for a few months, then the bank can come after the company's assets and your personal assets. So if the company goes belly up and you can't pay back that loan, it'll come after your personal house, your personal bank account, your car, your watch, whatever. It'll come after all of your personal belongings to pay back that loan. Now, obviously, if you're just starting out a business, this is where most people start here. It's just a sole proprietorship. That's where I start. But once you start growing that business and growing multiple businesses, like I'm going to talk about here, you're going to want to think about starting to move that business into a corporation or an LLC. You know what, let's just talk about the liability of a corporation and an LLC right now, and then we'll get on to the other things that I mentioned here. So a corporation. I like to just use Facebook. Okay. Everyone knows that Mark Zuckerberg is the founder, the creator. He owns the largest percentage of Facebook. I don't know what the percentage is. Let's just say it's 30%. And then a bunch of investors and shareholders earn or hold 70% of that company. Millions of people own 70% of the company. If Facebook were to default on some loans, or if Facebook were to go bankrupt, or if Facebook were to get sued, or anything like that, Mark Zuckerberg is not going to have his personal belongings or whatever. The banks won't be able to go after his personal stuff, his personal house, his car, his whatever, personal computers, all that kind of stuff. And if someone were to sue him, they can't go after his personal stuff. So that's one of the big things. A corporation is a completely separate entity. And actually, we're going to talk about taxes here. So as I mentioned here, in the sole proprietorship, if your company makes $100,000, it gets taxed as personal income. A corporation gets taxed all on its own. And it actually goes through this thing called double taxation. So everyone that is I'm sorry to generalize people, but a lot of young liberals out there want to raise corporate tax rates in the United States and in Canada. But then what happens here is that shareholders, which are just investors in corporations, like if you were to buy a stock, you are a shareholder, you are an investor. So shareholders get paid and get a percentage of the profits through dividends. Oh, you guys have heard me mention dividends before. It's all starting to make sense now. Yeah, so that's what dividends are. They're just a percentage of the profits shared amongst all of the shareholders. Now, those are taxed on top of the corporate tax. So the corporate tax takes 40% off the top, and then when your dividends come in, they get taxed from, it actually depends. There's actually different tax brackets too. So they can get taxed anywhere from 0% if you're poor to, I think the max is about 40% in Canada they can be taxed at, or maybe even if it's higher. There's a lot of factors here actually, if it's domestic, if it's international. But yeah, so you get taxed on your dividends and the corporation gets taxed right off the top. So a corporation can get taxed at, the shareholders can get taxed at 60%. That's not unreasonable. And so that's what the biggest disadvantage of a corporation is, that they get double taxed. And that really sucks if you set that up. We're going to get to some more things here. We're going to talk about the annual reports and meetings here. But now we're going to move on to the LLC and the liability and the taxation here. So a cool thing about the LLC is that an LLC, a limited liability company, has the option of being taxed exactly like a corporation. They can be taxed on dividends and corporate tax if they want to, or they can choose to get taxed as a personal income. So I will give you the example here. Whatever your graphic design, Jack Chapple Inc. or whatever, if I make $100,000 in profits, I can choose to get taxed at the corporate tax and the dividend tax if I want to, which would be 50%, or I could choose the personal income tax, which would be probably lower. But generally, the members of an LLC get taxed as personal income. So $100,000, if I own 60% of the business and Bob owns 40% of the business, I get $60,000 of the profit, Bob gets 40% or $40,000, and that gets taxed as our total personal tax bracket. So I don't know what that would be. I'm sorry that this is confusing, by the way. I'm trying to cover a giant topic, which is one of the reasons why I haven't really wanted to make this video. But there's so many differences, and a lot of people have to go to school for this kind of stuff. Like I have a tax guy. He's the guy who tells me all this kind of stuff. You know what? I'm going to get to that actually. I'm going to talk about which one would be best for you and when you should make the jump to here or when you should make the jump to here. Like which one would be the best to set up for you. But we got a few more differences here. One thing I forgot to mention is that if you are the owner of a corporation like Mark Zuckerberg, so yeah, you get the dividends. You obviously have 30% of a valuable company, so you can sell your shares off. That's important too, but you can also pay yourself a salary, and that would get taxed as a personal income. So that's actually something cool about the corporation too, and that's something to think about. But there's actually, it's written in the legality that it has to be a reasonable salary. So you can't just pay yourself the entire profit or whatever. It actually has to be something quite reasonable. So another thing here is that if you set up a corporation, it is your legal responsibility to have annual reports and meetings with your shareholders. And sometimes you have to have 4 of these a year, sometimes it's once a year, 4 times for every quarter. Usually that's what happens. So a lot of the times actually, if you've invested in the stock market and you've invested in a corporation that pays you whatever dividends and stuff, in the mail, a lot of the times, or through email, but I still think most companies do it through mail, you will get packages of the annual reports of profits and losses, where the expenses are going. Usually mine range from 20 pages to a couple hundred pages. I think I've seen maybe about 150 pages. So yeah, those will just randomly show up too. I like getting those sometimes. It's like, oh yeah, I forgot I was invested in that company. So that's something kind of cool here. So which one would be best for you? So that's probably the most important thing that you guys should take from this video. So if you're just starting out and it's just from your home and you're not planning on taking out a bank loan or getting any sort of investors to start up, like you're trying to, I think it's bootstrapping, you're just trying to start a company from nothing like I did, sole proprietorship. That's where you should probably start, because that is the easiest way to start a business. Now what you can do is when the business starts growing and maybe you buy a house, you start making some money, and maybe you want to launch some other businesses too, that's when you're going to want to go and move each business or each entity into an LLC. That's probably the best thing for the vast majority of people watching this video, is you're going to want to open up an LLC once your business starts growing to, I don't know, probably maybe a little bit more than 6 figures, like $200,000, $150,000, and you have different branches of income coming in. That's when you're going to want to start moving into an LLC or thinking about it. But again, this is only for people in the United States. So myself in Canada, I cannot open an LLC. It's just it's not a legal thing in Canada, so I can't do it. But all of you in the United States and countries that do that, that's what you're going to want to do. When your business starts growing, probably go into an LLC. So what is a corporation for? I recommend you starting a corporation if you got to start the business on a loan. You have a bunch of investors. Maybe you're like making an app or something, or have some sort of new tech idea. Corporation's probably the best way to go, so that it's really easy to divvy up ownership of the company and everyone gets paid. And if the business fails, each one of the individual shareholders don't get screwed over. And same thing goes for like retail. If you're setting up a retail business, or if you're setting up any sort of like a bricks and mortar business, a lot of the times you want to set up a corporation just so it's separate from your own personal assets. So a lot of the times when you open a brick and mortar business, you almost always have to take out some sort of loan, whether it's from a bank, from a private lender, whatever it may be. You have to take out a loan, and if the loan goes bad, if the company fails, you don't want the lender coming up and trying to take your house away. And there's actually one experience that I've seen of that before, is that one of the people that I knew in my corporate job actually got screwed over and was attempting to go after the person's house and that kind of stuff. And then they ended up fleeing the country. So that was kind of funny. So anyways, we're going to move on here. An LLC, so I think I kind of mentioned this already. I think it's good for anyone looking to open like a real estate business or any sort of growing business. So that would be my recommendation. When you would want a separation in terms of sources of your income. So if I were to have that graphic design Chapple Inc. business, then I could make a real estate business, which is separate. And then I could make an investment business, which is separate, an investment fund or whatever. And it would all be separate. So if I were to get sued, or if I were to default on any sort of mortgage loan or anything, they won't come after my personal house or my personal car or personal whatever. So those are kind of the main difference here. Hopefully I explained that reasonably well. This is a very complex issue, again, that people go to school for, and I have a tax guide that tells me everything to do. But this is just a general overview. Saying that corporations are actually, in the United States, are split into I think it's S Corp and C Corp. I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't live there, so don't trust me on that. And then there's partnerships and stuff that go in here too. So, but that's just a general overview. If you're starting out with no funding, go here. If you're starting out with some funding or investors, probably start here. If you're starting out and you have like a partnership or a couple members here that are all contributing, probably want to start here. And eventually, if you're here, you're going to want to end up here if your business is growing most of the time. So I think that's going to kind of wrap it up here. That's a long video, and I'm really sorry that this was confusing. I tried to explain it as best as I could. There's more advantages and disadvantages. I think that's going to wrap it up. So I'd like to thank you very much for watching. You're all very beautiful people. I'll see you guys in the next video.